Hey everyone, today I have a special guest. His name is Pete, and he's working on a very special project. I actually want him to talk a little bit about what he does and what he's been working on. And also, if you can share a little bit of your past experience of what you have done career wise and what you're doing now.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on your channel. So my name is Pete Williams. My career started while I was still in college. I had entered a animation magazine sponsored contest with MTV Animation, sort of pitch your own cartoon character. This is when they were looking for the next Beavis and Butthead at the time, and so I was still in college and sort of over winter break. I used the 2 weeks that I had off from school to create this little really crude pencil test animation of these four characters that were loosely based on myself and my three friends from high school. And lo and behold, a few months later, I got a call from MTV saying that I had won the contest, and they invited me to do a development deal to kind of develop those characters into a show for the channel while still in school. So I kind of left college to pursue that opportunity, started working at MTV, and kind of went in and out of development hell for a period of a few years, developing that show because I was still very new to the industry and had never done anything like that before. But eventually, the show did get greenlit. It did air on MTV for a very short run. I believe it was canceled after 6 episodes on the channel. So it did not make it all the way through its 13 episode run, but it was a co-production with a Canadian company. So it was written and down in New York at MTV, but it was a co-production with a Canadian studio. So all the animation was done up in Canada, and so the Canadian studio, they had a deal to air it on another network up in Canada called Teletoon, which was basically like the Canadian version of Cartoon Network at the time. And when it aired on Teletoon, it garnered a pretty big following in Canada, and they kind of kept airing the same 13 episodes over and over and over again for like the next 5 or 6 years. And so there was a large fan base that kind of grew up with that show, just watching the same 13 episodes over and over again.
Wow.
But when the show was canceled at MTV, I then, had to pursue other opportunities. I started doing a little screenwriting in Hollywood. Eventually ended up starting a small animation studio with a friend of mine who I had met at MTV during my time there. And we did some commercial work and video installations for amusement parks, and that kind of branched out to another small company that we had started. But in the back of my mind, I always wanted to return to Undergrads, which was this animated series I had created when I was, still a young whippersnapper. And the fan base in Canada was very supportive of wanting an end to the story, or at least a continuation of the story, because we did leave it kind of on a cliffhanger at the end of that first season, thinking we were going to get renewed, but that never happened. So there was a long period of time trying to revive that series, and we went down a number of different roads, but there was always an issue with the rights to the series because I didn't own the rights. They were owned by MTV, and they were partially owned by the Canadian co-production. And getting the two entities that shared the rights to kind of negotiate back, with each other was very difficult. So eventually I was able to secure just the film rights. So I was able to just do a one-off feature-length movie, not able to do necessarily a second season. But I was that's all I could get, and I was happy to get anything. So that's what I've kind of been working on and off for the last several years. Did a Kickstarter campaign to kind of raise the funds for pre-production, so we could afford to pay a screenwriter to help me write the script, storyboard artists to do the storyboards, new designs, new character designs, new location designs, and everything that the movie required. And then ran out of Kickstarter money, and have kind of been trying to keep the production going and find different ways where we can actually produce the animation. We pitched the project around numerous studios, and just the climate of the industry right now, there's not a whole lot of buying going on, or there's projects being canceled, but not a whole lot of new projects being purchased. So the original plan of getting a streaming service to buy this, or a distributor, just didn't pan out. So we're now kind of self-funding it, myself and my production partner. But yeah, looking for new ways to do the animation at a lower cost, because we know we can't afford a full service animation studio to help us do it.
How long has this production been going for? I saw some videos, and it seems like it's been years. Do you feel like there's still that interest, and do you feel like you can still capture the attention of the younger audience who have like a whole different way of thinking? And because I'm not even sure if are you trying to like still base everything in that time, or is this like current time? And you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And yeah, I mean, to your point, this production's been going on for years. We did the Kickstarter campaign for it in 2018, towards the end of 2018. So yeah, it's been, we're coming up on 6 years now. And certainly, the core fan base is still asking for it and they're still supporting it. But there's been a lot of people that have said, this movie is never going to happen. I don't know if I'm even interested in this movie anymore. And yeah, it is. So the movie is set still in that time period of the early 2000s, to pick up right where the show left off. And so first and foremost, like I am really making this for the fans of that show. So, people that either were in high school or college at that time, and are now older, but still have, nostalgia for that time period. And the technology at that time was obviously very different. The internet was still kind of this brand new shiny toy. And the way we communicated through the internet was different. There was no social media at that time. So it was definitely, it's funny to think of the early 2000s as far enough back that you could make a movie that treats it as kind of a time capsule nostalgia piece. But that is basically what we're trying to do. And yeah, as far as capturing a new audience, I don't know. I hope young people would be interested in it, but I think first and foremost, it is made for, the audience that kind of either grew up with it or found it maybe a little bit later in life.
Yeah, I do want to touch on the whole process of now that you've included AI into the way you're creating this. I would like to know what was some of the things you were kind of experimenting with before this, because I did watch a video where you were saying that it was very expensive to do a movie like this. It's extremely expensive, and you were doing a lot of stuff on your own with. I'm assuming you have a team, or a small team, very small team. And what were you doing? What were you experimenting with before you tried the AI? And we'll get into the AI in a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, initially when we first kickstarted the project, it was my wishful thinking that we would find a backer, or a distributor or like a Netflix to come on board and give us that full production budget that we thought we would need to do this movie traditionally, like the show was, because the show was traditional 2D animation, all hand drawn, sent overseas to do all the in-betweens and then sent back. And it was just a show that was made in 2001, obviously was a very different production pipeline than today. When it was looking like that was going to be iffy, even at on the onset of this project, I was starting to look at ways that we could maybe do it on a smaller budget, or at least a pipeline that I was more familiar with, because I've basically, with my career, spent the last 15 to almost 20 years in the 3D world. So I was trying to find ways where we could maybe utilize 3D to do some things cheaper than we would have to do, with traditional 2D animation. So I was definitely looking at initially going like the cell shader route in the 3D software package, like a Cinema 4D or a Maya or a Blender. And I did tests where, I built one of the characters in 3D, and I spent, a couple of weeks really messing around and fighting with the cell shaders and the way that it sketches lines and follows contours to get it to look like the design of that character in 2D. And I was never really happy with that end result. It still looked very computer generated, and as soon as the character turns and the contour of their nose changes, the way that line was being redrawn just didn't look right. It didn't look like the way it should in the design of that character. So did some tests where I built some of the sets in 3D and applied some Toon Shader looks, and for the sets it didn't actually look half bad, but for the characters I just was not happy with it. Eventually, when AI started catching on, and it was really some of your videos that inspired me to think this was something that might actually be a helpful tool, where you would utilize the 3D model and the 3D animation, but then use the AI to redraw it And if you trained it on artwork of that character, would that be enough for the AI to then redraw it in a way that was more similar to an artist rotoscoping over that animation than
Yeah.
necessarily the computer's cell shader? So that's what I've been, experimenting with for the last couple months.
Yeah, like it's interesting because I've done just like really short videos, nothing like big like you're doing, but just short clips of like rendering a 3D animation, running it through like for example Comfy UI or an AI generator, and people saying, "Hey, why don't you just use a cell shader? Why don't you use like you're better off just using the cell shader?" And I think you just pointed out the reason why a lot of people would not want to just put on a cell shader, because there is a particular look to it. I remember specifically when I used to watch, because I still love Futurama, but I used to watch a lot of it before, and even back then, like several years ago, before I was doing even 3D animation at all, with my untrained eye, I was able to see when just the Planet Express ship was like rotating, and it just looked different. It felt different when you saw it. And I at the time I didn't really know what it was. I just thought like, oh, that looks kind of weird. But now when I look at it, it's like obvious. Oh, okay, then just use like a 3D cell shader for that. They did it even with characters, like with Bender and stuff. Sometimes they do like 3D or just like rotations in ways that it's probably way easier than having to hand draw it. So the whole AI thing, it definitely allows for you to give it that look and that kind of that feel that you have when you're hand drawing it. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that you would want to go that route. And I think a lot of people, a lot of productions right now, a lot of studios are actually looking into that and researching it and hiring people to really develop ways to use this technology, like in animes, and I'm sure in tradition other style of animation as well. So yeah, when I saw your video of how you were implementing this, I was like very very intrigued, and I that's why I wanted to invite you, because I was like I have to just ask you about this, because I think a lot of people, like not just me, but I'm sure a lot of people that are subscribed to me are would find this fascinating, because I think a lot of them would like to somehow do animations like this. And based on just the feedback that I get when I do my stuff, they're like, "Oh my gosh!" Like they want to make movies or episodes too with this. So I think you are definitely an inspiration when it comes to that, because you're
Mm.
doing this like pretty much on your own, and obviously you're getting some help by just the fans and stuff. That's really amazing that you were able to implement this. So what were some things that were inspiring you? You said you did mention like you saw some of my videos and stuff. Is there anything else that kind of inspired you to say like, oh, this could really work? And how do I get started? And how did you get started with it? Like how what was the whole process, and what kind of issues that you run into when it came to this?
Yeah, so as far as other videos, I can't remember specifically. I know I saw a lot of different videos that had a similar technique of taking, either video or 3D animation and then utilizing the AI to redraw it in, a more 2D style. But your videos definitely like stuck out. There was a video that you had done of like 3D animation, and then you applied this really cool 2D style to it. And when I saw that, I was really blown away, because I thought, well, that's kind of what I'd like to do. I'd love to be able to take the 2D artwork that I have of these characters and just train the AI to redraw it exactly that same way and apply that style to the 3D animation that, I would be comfortable generating. And so that's what I tried. I owe you, I owe you, a debt of gratitude for really inspiring me to go down that path, because I really had not even considered AI up until that point. But I guess what I was hoping to get out of the AI was to see if it would give me more of that hand-drawn look, more of the imperfections that you get with hand-drawn animation, and less of that perfect, clean, crisp 3D cell shader look that I was getting when I tried that route in, my 3D software that I was using. So I believe, the first path I went down was to really try to just replicate, the process that you had used. I was unable to really get Comfy UI to play nice with the LoRa that I had trained on my character's 2D artwork. So I ended up having to go back into Automatic 1111 until I was able to get something that looked, even remotely usable. So yeah, I'm utilizing Anime Diff, or Anim Diff. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Animate diff. That's
Yeah,
how I hear it. Yeah.
and I used Koya to sort of train the LoRa on my artwork of the character. And the initial results, obviously were terrible. Went down, there's a lot of trial and error, trying this, trying that, multiple different settings, and eventually got to a point where I was able to utilize image to image plus animate diff plus 2 different control nets, feeding it, the same sequence of artwork, before I was able to get something where that LoRa would be applied in a way that would be more faithful to the artwork that I was using to train it on.
So you draw the artwork yourself, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, I tried initially to utilize just screenshots from the show, just to get
Just
some
to test
initial
it.
results to see how that would pan out. But the show was made in 2001, so it was standard
Yeah.
definition. Taking screenshots, they were just blurry and fuzzy, and they were a mess. So yeah, it was spending multiple nights on my iPad, sort of creating higher res drawings of this one character, and then painting him and shading him the way that he was shaded in the show, so that hopefully the AI would pick up enough of that to replicate it, when it came time to doing the redrawing.
That's the thing when you have something that's hand drawn is you do see there is a little bit of that imperfection because there is like a hand involved with like having to make those lines and stuff. So I can see how AI can really help with that because AI, you would think that it's perfect, but obviously where it's at right now, it's not perfect. Maybe once it gets to a point where it is perfect, it's not going to be as useful
It'll
anymore.
be
It's going to be
too
like
much like the 3D toon
the
shader.
3D. Yeah, it's going to be like, oh, no,
Yeah.
okay, we have to find it. Well, we have to use the old legacy version of the
That's
AI
right.
or something.
I
But
especially notice it with a character's like head rotation,
mhm,
with a traditional cell shader, because as soon as the character moves from like that 3/4 where you might have gotten the lines to look correct in the cell shader, as soon as they start rotating and then that nose line, starts disappearing or fading, and the placement of it looks weird when they're looking directly at camera before they get to that next 3/4. What I liked about what the AI does is it takes all those different poses that I gave it in the training process, so that it knows when the character starts looking this way, it's still trying to draw that line that it's learned of the curvature of the nose, even though it might not exist there in
mhm,
that 3D rendering that you're giving it, as a source.
right.
It's really trying to be faithful to the artwork that you originally trained it on, and then when it gets to that straight on pose, it knows to draw the nose, like this, with just a one curve underneath, and you lose those sidelines. So that's really what I was hoping to get out of the AI method, and I've been really pleased with those results. There's obviously lots of things that it gets wrong, and the hair, a little tuft of hair gets drawn a million different ways over the course of maybe 35 frames. But I'd much rather go in and correct those little details frame by frame than having to draw all of that animation from scratch.
Yeah. So it's not meant to just like just totally just do the work for you. You do have to go in there and clean it up, and especially if you are an artist yourself, it's that's possible to where you don't have to worry so much now about every single frame, but like just specific frames. Like, oh, there's just a frame that's off right there, and then 5 frames later, oh, that one's off there. Instead of having every single time like having to redraw
Yeah.
it or stuff. I'm sure it makes things way faster and then also way cheaper, because you're also you're using like a mocap suit to like record a lot of the animations, right? Like the movements and stuff like that, and run it through Animate Diff. I found it very interesting. I saw one of your videos where you were having issues with the eye, and then you had to find a way where you trained the AI with drawings that didn't have the eye, the pupil, right? Because the eye was just not being consistent, right? It
Yeah,
wasn't
the pupil size would change from frame to frame, or even the
right.
shape of it and the highlight in the eye. Yeah, it was just it looked very wonky, and it was one of those things that I thought, well, and I believe this was suggested by several of the commenters on that video. So thank you to all those people that wrote and made their suggestions. But the pupils was something. Well, yeah, that's something the computer version. They're just round circles. Like I'd be perfectly fine with the 3D software to just render that element out and composite it onto the AI rendering later, and know that those pupils are going to be consistent all the way
Right.
through. And even the mouth was another issue. I had an issue with the mouth because I really needed, obviously, it needs to be faithful to the 3D rendering of that performance of the mouth, articulating all those different shapes, especially when speaking. And the AI just had a real hard time with that. And again, I'm sure if I had really worked at honing a different maybe method, like if I had gotten Comfy UI to work, maybe it would have given me better results. But it was just another element. I thought, well, I can just try to utilize the cell shader in the 3D software for just that and composite that on top of the AI. But I just felt like as long as you still had enough of the AI's rendering in the final product, you'd get all those wobbles, that you wouldn't get from a cell shader otherwise. I know you can go back in, and I know you can do a lot of different things with cell shaders, but it's almost like some of those imperfections that the AI produces are closer to what you would get if an artist tried to go frame by frame, because they're not going to get everything perfect, especially with head rotations. They're kind of inventing where they think that line placement needs to be. And
Yeah.
that's what I feel is really missing from the cell shader method.
Just to clarify, you're not using Comfy UI. You're using Automatic, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Automatic. Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting because I had given up on Automatic, using it for consistency a while back. But the fact that you're able to get the results you're getting through it, it's actually really really interesting.
Yeah, and
Um,
I mean, I really tried with Comfy UI to get it to work, and
mhm.
I just, for whatever reason, it just did not play nice with my LoRa that I had trained to get it to feed through. And I'm sure I was screwing something up, but I just was kind of pulling my hair out, and eventually said, "Let me just go back to Automatic 1111, see if I can get it to work." And
So
yeah,
you're using Animate Diff inside of Automatic 11 or no? Oh,
yeah,
okay, okay, yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I've used Animate Diff in Automatic to do some generation like animations too, and I really liked what it was doing. But I just got so comfortable with Comfy. It's like it's kind of hard to go back. But maybe I should go back and just check it out again.
yeah. I mean, I love the layout of Comfy, and I'm sure at some point, and that's the other issue with all this, is that everything keeps changing.
Hmm.
It's improving, but it's constantly changing. And so, one method you were using this day, you see somebody else's YouTube video and they've just done it a completely different way, and the results are amazing. You're like,
Yeah.
damn, now I got to learn this whole new technique and throw away everything else I've been working on.
Yeah. That's definitely struggle. Like there's just different kinds of people in the whole AI space. There's the people who want to use something that's going to give them consistent results, and it's just going to be something they can use, hopefully for months and hopefully maybe even years. And then there's just people who are just like, oh, what's the next thing?
Yeah.
What's the advancement? I want to test it. And they're not looking for a consistent workflow. They're just looking for something like to push it, to keep pushing it and seeing how far they can push it, and trying to create the most wild looking things with AI. And there are people who are like, no, we want to create something more like production. We want to create like episodes of a cartoon and anime and all this. And there are, like I said, there are studios doing that right now. I am curious, and I wanted to ask you, like, something that I've noticed since I started creating content with AI and stuff is like there are several opinions about it, right? There are people, especially people who do animation and who draw and do art. One side is like concerned about artists getting their work scrapped online without their consent, like to train AI models. Others think AI is like a great tool that should be used as long as people have the rights to the art and that the model's trained on.
Right.
And the third is like, don't use AI at all. It has no soul, therefore it has no place in any creative project. And I would say that's the third one is the least, probably the weakest point for me, because that's very subjective. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what you think of all that.
Yeah. Well, certainly the point of, artist work being, scraped and stolen, without their permission. Like, obviously, like that's horrible. I certainly sympathize with artists that have had their work stolen, and then they turn around and they see an app that is utilizing a style that's like completely their signature style, and some other company's profiting off of it. Yeah, it's completely unethical. But I see it as there is the potential for this to be utilized as a tool for artists, where it will make certain tasks, especially in animation. If you don't have a full studio, behind you to produce animation, it's a lot of work for one person.
Right.
And it would allow animators or artists that don't have that studio pipeline or infrastructure to be able to do something where they could create a short, or in my case, hopefully an animated feature, where the AI becomes a tool that makes certain things more possible because it speeds up the process. Whether it's something that helps clean up the animation, where if you just provide the rough animation, even if it's still hand drawn. As far as it being like a replacement for artists, you're never going to be able to replace an artist, because the artist is approaching their art with intention that the AI is never really going to understand. It'll do its best to approximate what it thinks it's supposed to be doing, but every line that an artist puts down, there's intention behind it. Whereas, the AI is producing something that's just, it's cobbling together and it's trying to approximate, and it's utilizing all these different sources to give you that end result.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, the AI, there's no intention behind it other than what you're feeding it. In a perfect world, I'd be doing this production completely traditional hand drawn, because I still think there's magic to that. But most people can't do that. It's a very laborious process. It involves a lot of people. And so, yeah, I am very I'm curious about it being utilized in a studio environment. But I think, at least for solo artists that are trying to put together something on their own, it's an interesting tool, and I think it can at least facilitate artists being able to produce more than they would otherwise.
Hmm. Yeah, I kind of have this. I see like a parallel when it comes to like even like the music industry. I know it's not equal, because obviously there's a lot of intricacies and differences between it, but I see like some parallels, because of like there was a time where, like, for example, if an artist wanted to record an album and get it heard, they would have to have to be signed to a label, or have some big crazy budget to go record and get their music out there. But now people can record on their laptop, and now their music can be heard at any moment, at any point. They can you know express themselves musically in so many different ways. Like, you don't need to hire a band, you don't have to hire a producer if you learn all the tools that would be required to do that. Again, I'm not saying that they're equal, because I know that there are major differences in it. But like, again, I see some parallels there, because then, like, a person like you don't have this big I mean, maybe, I don't know, multi-million dollar budget to finish this movie that you really really want to finish. But if AI can help with that to get it there, I think that's a great thing, because then you get to share the story, share this thing that you want to share with the fans and stuff, and it makes that possible. And I think that's great when you can have that ability. And I hope that many others who also are able to, who have ideas, who have stories in their minds, and they can use this technology for something to express themselves, and not, hopefully not abuse it, or use it in ways that, yeah, is harmful to anybody. Do you know of any other major productions, since you're like in, I don't know how, if you know any studios and stuff that are using AI in their productions as well?
Yeah, I don't personally. I mean, I haven't really been dialed into the studio system for a number of years now,
Yeah.
because I kind of was off doing my own thing. But yeah, I'd be very curious. I'm sure they are,
Hmm.
because it's the new toy, and I'm sure a lot of studios are looking at it as, how can we use this to get rid of artists and do this a lot quicker and more streamlined. And I do think they are going to find, if they haven't already, that it still requires an artist. Like, you still
Hmm.
need that person behind the wheel, especially if you have a specific vision. somebody that vision needs to be provided by an artist and a human being
Right.
that, and like the method that I'm using where you're feeding it specific artwork because you want a specific style, you want a specific look. An artist still needs to generate that to give
Mhm.
to the AI. So yeah, I can see it being utilized hopefully in an ethical way in studios, but I do think they're going to quickly realize that it's not that big like time saver that as it appears to be, because even I'm
Right.
finding that there's a lot of work that goes into the preparation before you can even get anything that you're happy with getting spit out.
Yeah.
And the cell, if I were to just go the cell shader route, that would have been way easier.
Right.
There's an artistry to that as well, but
Mhm.
this is just requiring a whole other level of prep work and drawing again. And I
Yeah.
would say the reason why I would go this route versus just strictly the cell shader route is because it does put more of that hand drawn personality back into the final rendering.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I see that. You are showing like an example of how it can be done in a way that's professional quality, because the stuff that you're doing, you're trying to do it to make it look like something that can be on Netflix, for example,
Right.
or be on Cartoon Network or a big channel. And to achieve that, using AI, I think a lot of people feel like that's not even possible right now. But you're proving that could be possible if you start to incorporate other traditional ways into it. It doesn't have to be just like, oh, just press generate and then it's done for you. There is a lot of soul in there because you're giving it direction. It's not aimless. There is something. There is a story that was written by a human. There is art that was drawn by a human, and the AI is just assisting to express like a lot of things visually. I'm sure a lot of people are interested in following the progress of this project that you're working on. If you want to share like where they can find you, where they can find where they can donate to give so that the project can be done. I'm sure that a lot of people, just by the fact that it's actually you're using AI technology, would find a lot of interest in the project.
Yeah, if people want to come check out, the YouTube channel for it, it's Undergrads the movie. As far as the Kickstarter, kind of once we reached our funding goal, that was it. We can't really accept any other donations. We may do another crowdsourcing again in the future, but for now, I just encourage everyone to come check out the YouTube channel, see the progress on the movie. If they want to like and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated,
Yes,
because
yes.
it would help us, down the road. If we do try to go and propose, pitch this to a studio, to show that there's still support for this project. Those like numbers and those subscriber numbers do help.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. I'll make sure to put a link to your channel in the description. So definitely go follow him and check out his videos on the behind the scenes of what he's been doing, and to find out when this whole project's even going to come out, right?
Yes, I'm very
Okay.
curious about that too.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Eric. It was a pleasure.